Welcome to Agrifood Conversations, brought to you by iSelect, the Van Trump Report, the Yield Lab Institute, and Family Farms Group. I'm Hannah Hund, an analyst on the iSelect Fund Ventures team, and I'm excited to welcome you all to today's discussion. Agrifood Conversations is all about driving innovation in agriculture. Each month, we highlight a specific theme, including emerging topics such as soil health, plant genetics, vertical farming, and aquaculture, to name a few. This month's theme is supply chains, and on today's call, we're joined by Melinda Dittmer, COO of Nexyst 360. The Nexyst 360 process is the only system in today's agriculture supply chain that provides traceability, sustainability, quality, mobility, and safety. Its system is centered around a NexBox, a 8-foot wide by 40-foot long steel smart container that has a globally unique identifier with a GPS tracking device and air quality monitor that can be monitored 24/7, 365 as it travels from location to location. Each container is sealed after the commodity is conditioned and tested. Then, if necessary, an inert gas such as nitrogen is introduced to provide the longest possible shelf life. Each of you knows companies are more likely to succeed with the right network of customers, talent, investors, and advisors. We've invited you to this call because you're some of the smartest, most talented people in Nexyst 360's market. You're potential customers for Nexyst 360's products and services. You have built a company similar to Nexyst 360, or you are a sophisticated business person or agricultural professional who understands the market and the challenges and opportunities Nexyst 360 may face. Before we get started, we have a quick poll question to get a better idea of who we have on the call today. Please take a few seconds to answer. A few process comments while you're filling out that poll. We are not soliciting investment. This presentation is to provide information to help Nexyst 360 find customers, mentors, and other strategic relationships that can help them grow their business. You are all on mute. You can use the chat window to ask a question at any time. This presentation is being recorded and will be available for replay. So without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce Melinda Dittmer, COO of Nexyst 360.
Thank you, Hannah, and welcome to everybody. Excited to share more about Nexyst 360. So as Hannah said, we are what we consider to be the next generation solution for crop traceability, storage, transportation, and data sharing. Sounds like a lot, but I'm going to walk through what that means. So as we all know, the current supply chain in ag has been developed over many generations, and it's built for efficiency and speed to move large quantities of crops. But all of this efficiency and speed causes degradation of our crops when we handle them multiple times. There's a lot of safety issues with grain bins. There's no traceability to the field of origin. So this is a big one where we know that in a small scale, there's been some traceability, but on a large scale, especially for commodity crops and even a lot of the organic crops, it's very hard to trace things back. And the current supply chain also has limited market access for our farmers. So a lot of farmers today have to sell their crops within a very small radius of their farming operations because they're limited to buyers in that area. It also has high fixed infrastructure cost and operational cost. So as we said, the next generation is asking for different things from our food, and the farmers need direct access to new markets. They need to reduce their labor costs. They need to lower capital and operational costs. They need to handle the crops less so that we can preserve the quality of them and have safer storage options. And consumers, on the other hand, are also demanding new things as we move into the new generations. They're definitely buying more organic and specialty crops, which we know a lot of those are being imported into the US today. They're asking for food safety. So every time we have a recall, we know it takes weeks to get something traced back. And in the meantime, we're throwing away large quantities of crops. The reduction in the carbon footprint. So sustainability is a big word that 10 years ago, many of us didn't talk about, but today has become a much bigger issue. And reducing food waste. So today, 40% of the food that gets grown gets wasted. And that's for a variety of reasons, but part of that is because we have a hard time getting it from the field to the consumer without degrading the quality. So Nexyst 360 is addressing all of these issues and more, and that's a big task to take on. But the way that we're doing this is by taking something fixed and making it mobile. So our NexBox, which is a part of the process, is a smart box. It's 6'4" tall and 40 foot long. So you load the crops at harvest and they remain sealed until they reach their final destination. This really short video just shows how the box is loaded, could be loaded. And this is using corn. We're definitely, we can use this for any commodity. We're starting with high quality crops, but this is an example of using corn. So you can see that in the top of the box, there's 2 different areas where you can load, and then when you shut the box, it's sealed, which is an important thing to consider. The other big part of the box is the data part. All the crop data is kept. You can scan the QR code, and then we can see the data, and that's the production data of how that crop was raised. It's also the quality of the crop in the box. So what's the percentage of protein in that crop, for instance, and all the information about how it was raised. Today, this is something that gets left at the field. So a lot of our farmers track this kind of data with their crops. They use it to make decisions, but then the processors and the buyers of the crops don't get that information. So what are some of the benefits of this process? Well, a big one is insurability. So as I said, today there's a lot of issues with the quality of the crop. And so if we can preserve the quality by reducing the number of handles, then we can also insure that crop and guarantee that the quality isn't going to degrade over time as it's handled. And by sealing the box and adding a nitrogen layer, we can also preserve that quality longer. We can accommodate bulk or palletized goods, and that's important for backhauls. Mobility, so as I talked about earlier, you know, by taking a fixed infrastructure with grain bins and elevators we're used to today and making them mobile, you're increasing all the market access for the farmers, but you're also opening up new transportation segments. Instead of just putting everything in a truck on the road, we can put it on rail, river, ocean. Also the traceability. So these boxes will have tracking devices in them and we'll have the data. And so that all becomes very important as you move through the supply chain. You can use a blockchain type technology to make sure that as the buyers of that crop, as the crop goes from the farm to a processor to a buyer, you can track all that through either a blockchain or some other mechanism to make sure that the buyers are receiving the information. So profitability, there's many components here. So by taking, like we said, we're reducing costs throughout the supply chain, but we're definitely reducing them at the farm level by not requiring farmers to have high amounts of infrastructure cost. And this is really important as they're trying to expand operations into organics, if they're raising seed for some of the seed companies, or if they're trying to go outside their geography and expand into other areas. We can then create a new way for them to store those crops. The shorter profile also allows us to have 3 versus 2 boxes on a rail car. So the crop data that I talked about earlier, this is some of the crop data that we talk about. So climate data, such as rainfall, the number of growing degree days, sustainability metrics, the production data. So these are just some examples of information that we could share with a potential buyer, and then the harvest data. So this is, the Nexyst 360 is a platform, and this is an important thing because what I don't want people to take away is that we're selling a product, because what we're doing is we're creating a new process. And that process is very important that it works from all parts of the supply chain. So we have to create repeatable loops between farmers and buyers so that these boxes aren't loaded at a field, shipped overseas, and we never see them again. So what we're doing is we're creating a link between a farmer, a processor, a buyer, and then a backhaul back to the Nexyst NexPad system. So long term, what we want to do is have regional operations where we can bring the boxes back to a location and then get them to the farmers. So this is an important component that we want to consider. So right now we're working on getting these first 2 or 3 loops created that is more of a pull-through strategy for us so that we've got the buyers or the processors signed up, and we're bringing farmers that are growing those crops. So the market size that we've identified, and this is really for our first 2 to 3 years as we're focused on high value crops such as organics and specialty crops. So think organic wheat, edible beans, peas are a big market today, especially chickpeas. So there's a lot of different high value crops that we can source and put into the boxes and get them to a processor who then can increase the premiums that they're charging to buyers because they've got data, traceability, and a higher quality preserved crop than they do today. So our timeline and milestones. So we really got going strong in 2018. Patents were filed in 2017, and then the executive team was formed at the end of 18. Prototypes were designed, and then in last year, we raised our friends and family round. And then we also spent a lot of time last year in making sure that we were in getting the word out and trying to understand exactly where we wanted to start, because as most people know, there's so many things you can apply this to, and we want to make sure we're focused, and we're focused on the things that are not only profitable for our company, but profitable for our customers as well. And so we've made sure that we've gotten to the point where we kind of know where we want to focus over the next year or two, and got that narrowed down. So in 2019, we were involved in a lot of different we were in some startup competitions. We were meeting with several different potential partners. We completed our prototype, and then in early 2020 of this year, we spent 5 weeks in Memphis for Ag Launch. And Ag Launch is, if you don't know what that is an accelerator that pairs us up with farmers. And so you bring farmers into your business much earlier than a typical startup would. And so very quickly and early on in your company, you've got that farmer feedback instead of waiting until you've got something fully developed and then you can't change it. At the end of May, we're going to be doing our first in-field test down in Texas with a partnership with Indigo Ag and Miller Milling, where we'll load the box of some IP wheat and we'll take that to a mill down in South Texas. And then later in the fall, we'll be doing some more testing down in Tennessee, and we'll do some testing up in Minnesota with some processors and farmers. And just all of that testing really is to make sure that we've got the box designed in a way that is easy to load, unload, and it seals. So we are right now building the next 2 boxes, which will be done the end of May, and then we'll continue production later this year as we're continuing to raise funds. We're also finalizing our ISO 9001 certification and making sure that we have that in place along with a quality preservation insurance program. In 2021, we'll be finalizing our data and blockchain components, and then continuing to develop these loops between producers, buyers, and backhauls, and scaling production of NexBoxes. And then as you move forward, we really want to develop cold boxes for produce markets, because a lot of us know that's where we have a lot of issues with food safety today and tracing crops back, and then continue our large scale production. So as I've kind of talked about, our value propositions really are around 3 major things, which is mobility, sustainability, and profitability. And preserving that crop quality, which today I think a lot of us that are involved in ag and have been for our careers know what kind of degradation happens when you load crops in the Midwest, for instance, and they get shipped over to Asia, and by the time they get them, they are completely a different looking crop than they were when they left the US, and we're trying to preserve quality so that doesn't happen. So the revenue model for Nexyst is really centered around 6 major things. The biggest one here is the NexBox, leasing that to the farmers or the processor. So the boxes are going to be leased to whoever has control of that product at the time. And like I said, with these closed loops that we're creating, we'll control who has the boxes when. The logistics and transportation portion of the box, the data drawing, and then atmospheric monitoring, and then long-term, the crop marketing part of it as well. So this is a slide that shows the analysis that we have done on what the Nexyst 360 system cost compared to current supply chain. And you'll see here that we can significantly reduce a variety of areas. The most important one is shrink, which is the handling of the crop multiple times because we're only handling it once. Another big one is freight, and a lot of that is because our entire model is predicated on the box being sent through the supply chain and then backhauls coming back. So today, a lot of containers that get shipped all come back empty. And if you can put a product in that a farm would need, for instance, think fertilizer, think other things that come from the Middle East, or I'm sorry, from the overseas, even car parts, anything that comes from overseas locations, we can bring those back and then ship our products back over. So long term, we want to get into the international markets, and freight and the backhaul will be a big part of that. The reason that I left this slide in here around revenue and net income is not because of an investor, but this one really shows us that it's very important for us with the NexBox to turn the box multiple times a year. So our ultimate goal is to create these loops that are repeatable. And the reason for that is because we know that when we're working with farmers, we're working with processors, we want to make sure that we are not impeding their processes. We want to add to their processes and make them more efficient. And by having the same repeatable process over again, we can make sure that our quality and the efficiency is maintained. And over time, that also makes Nexyst more profitable, but also increases the profitability for those partners that we're working with. This is our team. Dana is our CEO, and he has been involved in the ag industry for his entire career and has had a number of startups and had a very large company that he exited with. Myself, I grew up on a farm, bought a farm after I graduated from college, and then also worked at John Deere for over 20 years and also managed an angel investing group. Our advisors, Dennis, who's one of our founders and is one of our advisors as well, has over 30 years of experience in ag. Jonathan as well, and then Dennis Daggett has been one of our advisors who's been very key in the crop insurance and risk management portion of what we're working on. So my last slide is around sustainability, and these are the 5 key areas that are really critical in the ag space around sustainability and even in the consumer space as a whole. And with using our system and not having all of the handles and all of the large infrastructure, we can reduce a lot of things, especially air quality, since we're not handling the crop. The food waste, there's about 5 to 7% of shrink through the supply chain today with typical crops. And then reducing energy consumption and prevention of deaths in grain bins. So that's my part of the presentation, and I'm open to take questions.
Perfect, and thank you, Melinda, for sharing all of this information, and congratulations on all of your progress to date. I'd like to let the attendees know that they can ask a question by typing it out in the Q&A box, or if you want to ask your question out loud, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you for you to ask your question out loud. I think I'll kick off the questions while you guys are writing those up. Here's one of my questions. What do you see in the market that makes now the right time to pursue and deploy a process like the Nexyst platform?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hannah. I think a lot of the reason that we started working on this is that, as we talked about early on in the early slides, the next generation is asking for new things. So traceability has become a huge issue in our food processes today. And, every time there's a food recall, we can't trace those crops back to where they came from. And there's also a lot of buyers that, and those are anything from food companies to foreign buyers that have asked for this for many years, and we have not been able to provide it. And so we know that there's a premium availability on those crops, and the farming profitability the last few years has been very limited. And so if we can find a new way to open up new markets by creating higher value crops to get to the buyers. So I would say the 2 things that really drove this was getting profitability back to the farms and the traceability component.
Great, thank you. And we also have we have a question from Meg. Meg, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Melinda, thanks for the presentation. Great to hear about Nexyst 360 and kind of the benefits that it's able to provide. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit more about what kind of early customer traction you've had and kind of who do you see this benefiting the most first?
Yeah, so like I said, we're going to go first to high value crops and markets. So we've been working with an edible bean processor up in Minnesota. And we did a really extensive value analysis study with them last fall to kind of really dig into what are some of the things that we can help with at the processor level. And those were from all kinds of things from right now, a lot of these processors or elevators, all these farmers at harvest are taking their crop directly to those processors and they get backlogged. The farmers have to sit there in their trucks. They also have to stop their combines if they don't have enough trucks. And so as we started having conversations with some of the processors and farmers, they quickly could see that this is something that could help them not have to shut off their combines, not have to deal with backlogs at harvest, but we could time when the boxes are filled and when they're brought to the processing facilities. And so a lot of our traction has come from places like that. Like I said, we're just starting our first in-field test at the end of May. And this fall, we'll be working with the edible bean processor, some farmers in Minnesota, a farmer in Tennessee, and then we'll expand from there as we get more boxes built.
Awesome, thanks. That's really helpful.
Next, we have a question from Will Hirschfeld. Will asks, do you have the ability to track the location of the boxes?
Yes, so the boxes have sensors on them and they'll be built into the box, into the side of it. And so we'll be able to track the box location wherever it's at.
Ted has a follow-up question. Ted wonders, what do you propose as to the cost of these units?
Right, so we will be leasing these to farmers and processors, and we do not have the final cost on those. We know that it's going to be very similar or even less than what they're paying for grain storage today. We know what the boxes are going to cost us, but we have not finalized what the cost will be per month or per day to the end users, but we do know from all of our early analysis that it will be less than what they're paying today.
Very interesting. An anonymous attendee wonders, how easily can these containers be cleaned, especially after backhaul if the container would contain fertilizer or car parts?
Yes, so our long-term plan, and in the short term, what we'll do is we'll clean these in a mobile way. So we've already got those identified, how we'll clean them in a mobile way. But long-term, in the next 2 to 3 years, as we build out what we're calling our next pad, that's a regional facility where we will take the boxes to clean them, to dry them, and to have the inspections done on the crops before we seal them, and also to put the nitrogen in the box. So we'll be doing that in a mobile way the first couple of years, but long-term, we've already built out what exactly a next pad location would look like in this regional place where we would do that to make sure that everything is completely cleaned out.
Thank you. Anova Memphis wonders, could you review the loading in the field and offloading at the customer process? What does this look like?
Yeah, so we can load at the field in 2 different ways. So one is having the box already on a truck and loading there directly into the box, or we can bring the boxes, Nexyst will bring the boxes to the farm, set them on the sides of the field, and they can be loaded at any time. And then we will come back and get them and take them away. If farmers already have their own trucks, we can help with putting them on the chassis trailer that they need to haul them away. But we don't expect anyone to get on any new, besides possibly a reacher. But that's another reason why it's important for us to make sure that we have a customer segment that is that we can have, can have the right tools in place to load, unload, and to get them to the processors. And we will make sure that the processors or the buyers have the tools that they need to unload the trucks. The example of what we're doing down in Texas is that we are working with a mill that they already are on a rail facility. And so they've already got reachers at their facility. And so when we truck the boxes to their facility, they already have the equipment they need to pull it off the truck and unload it. And so that is a big component of what we're making sure is that we do not want to impede the processes at the farm or at the processors. And so we will make sure that the right equipment is in place and we'll provide the transportation to do that.
Thanks for sharing that process. We have a question from Chris Thoen. Chris asks, can the container be tracked for unauthorized opening where one might adulterate the product?
Yes, so we have been working with a couple different companies that have sensors and that will track the oxygen level. And so with the sensor that we've had 2 sensors that we're going to test at the end of the month. One of them tracks temperature, humidity, and they're adding an oxygen component. And so that would mean that if the box was opened or the seal was broke, we immediately would get a notification that there's oxygen in the box that there shouldn't be. So that is the way that we're going to do this going forward. And that's why it's really important how we engineer the box to make sure it's sealed in a way that it's not getting oxygen into the product, because oxygen is what, of course, causes the degradation of it.
We have another question from Ken Harrison, and it's kind of in regards to arrival quality of your product. Ken is asking some questions around what type of content quality testing is done and what tester qualifications are required. Do you have any additional information about USDA grading or processor specs?
Yes, so we have been working on a process where we will make sure that the quality is preserved. And by doing that, there's a number of tests that we have to go through. I am not the expert on that on our team. So Dennis has been very involved in that with a couple other parties, and they have a lot of detail around that. And if you would like, we could send that to you or share that with you. That is not like I said, that's not my area of expertise, but that's part of the certification process we're working on to make sure that if we're going to ensure the product that's in the box, it has to maintain a certain quality level. And we're working on having all of that in place. So those documents are already put together, and we'll start testing those in May as well. But we can send more information out about that if you want to share your contact information with Hannah.
Yeah, absolutely. Share that with me and I can connect you to. Oops, sorry, just a second. My internet cut out there for a minute. I'm in the middle of a storm in Kansas. Hey, Eva, could you ask the next question that's in the list?
Sure. Russell asked, what is the estimated useful life of the boxes?
Typical containers are 10 to 15 years. That's something that, as we go through time, we'll understand better. But these are steel containers. We are also looking at an aluminum model and doing a test with that as well. But steel containers are typically 10 to 15 year life, if not longer.
Great. Our next question is, can you expand on which elements of the product are covered in your patents?
Yes, so our patents were written around 2 things. One is the box components itself, and the other is the next process, which is making sure that when you load it at the field, that you're keeping the crop in the box until it reaches the end and the process of that. So the patents are around both of those, and they're both pending. But the box engineering itself is the first patent.
And our next question is from Jim Burrell. How will the data regarding the grain or produce be entered at the farm level?
Yeah, so we're working with a company that today is getting the crop data and using it already. And a lot of this information farmers are already tracking. And in the early days, what we'll be doing is just getting all that information accumulated, probably in an Excel spreadsheet here in the first couple months. But then it will be on a platform that we get a download from their system that they use to track that. So a lot of farmers are using multiple systems. So they've got their machine system, they've got, or the machine data, they've got some of their production data, which might be in spreadsheets for them as far as what chemicals were used, all those types of things. There's a number of companies right now that we're all working to gather this exact data to work with farmers. And we'll just be working directly with the farmer to gather all that data. So like I said, I would assume the first year, so we're going to be doing a lot of this manually. But then as we move on, we're working with a company that can help us do all this electronically using API feeds from different systems.
And then we have one other question from Ken Harrison. Do you have dispute resolution about quality?
So that will be built into our insurance documents. And like I said, we can get you some more information about that. It's a similar, I think a similar question to what we had earlier about how the quality will work and what will happen if the quality is not preserved. That will be built into our insurance documents.
And Russell asked, what is the empty weight of the steel box?
Oh my goodness, I think I'm going to get in trouble for not being able to answer this one, but I think Dennis just told me this morning. We will have to get back to you on that one. So I'm sorry, I can't even answer that right now. I don't know if Dennis is on, if he can put that in the chat. I'm not sure who can type that answer, but I don't have an answer for you on that one. Sorry about that.
And Hannah, that was the last of the questions from the attendees, if you have any other questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Eva. Well, I think one
it looks like the box, sorry about that. It looks like the box is 7,500 pounds.
Great. Perfect. Well, thank you all for your really engaged questions, and Melinda for taking the time to speak with us. One question that I like to kind of end with is, what can the audience help you out with here, and how can they best find you?
Yeah, so I think as far as how people can help out, as I said, it's as an early stage startup, what you're always doing is raising money and getting the word out for potential partnerships. So I think anything that people can do to help in those two those two things would be great. And I'm sorry, what was the second question that you asked, Hannah?
Yeah, how can they best get a hold of you?
Yeah, so multiple ways. Our website, there's a contact section at the bottom of the front page of the website. You can send us an email through that. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So you can reach us at any of those locations as well. And thank you very much for inviting us to share our story today. And I appreciate the great questions that everyone had.
Perfect. Thank you, Melinda, for taking the time. We host these calls every week at 3 o'clock Central, and you can register for the Agrifood Conversations webinar series by going to agrifoodconversations.com. If you want to share Melinda's work with any of your friends, a replay of this webinar will be emailed to you in the next 24 hours, or they can go ahead and log on to or go to agrifoodconversations.com to view it themselves. Thank you so much for joining.